Hello everyone, my name is Sneha Patel. My research topic is based on deaf pupils' over-reliance on TA support in a mainstream setting of a resource-based school and what we can do about it. I have listed the areas that will be covered by the end of this presentation. Please feel free to ask questions as I present. Let us start with defining the term over-reliance. Talk to the person beside you on what you think over-reliance means. Please share your definitions of over-reliance. The Oxford English Dictionary defines over-reliance as excessive dependence on or trust in someone or something. Now think about what this would look like for our deaf pupils attending a mainstream setting. Can you think of examples of when there may be an over-reliance on TA support? Share your ideas with the person beside you. For example, a deaf student depends on his or her interpreter or the teacher of the deaf to inform the mainstream classroom teacher about subtitle needs when watching a video, or to tell him or her when it is time to go to speech and language therapy sessions, and to provide extra explanation when he or she does not understand the learning task, or perhaps was not paying attention when instructions were given. Such behaviors are barriers that prevent deaf pupils from being independent and empowered to self-advocate, hindering them from accepting responsibility for their education. Can you think of issues that may arise for our deaf pupils who are over-reliant on TA support? Please share your ideas. These are some of the issues I thought of alongside the ones you have mentioned. The first point raised is about how the deaf pupil develops a behavioral habit of dependency on the TA, relying on them for every step needed to be taken. This in turn leads to the pupil developing a learnt helplessness. A deaf pupil may demonstrate a lack of initiative or persistence. Thus, they may be afraid to try a new task, so they look to someone else to do it for them, or they give up on a task too quickly. Others refuse to try a new task independently until they have had adult prompts and examples shown to them. They also are reluctant to make choices without looking to an adult to tell them which choice is right. Some deaf pupils with learned helplessness even become depressed or withdrawn. The language of learned helplessness can include noticeable language patterns that the deaf pupil uses, such as "I can't because I am deaf" or "this is too hard for me." When a child learns to be helpless, this state of mind is personal, pervasive, and permanent. Students who have learned to be helpless are emotionally bound by the belief that they personally are the problem, while at the same time creating cognitive connections that they have no control over any aspect of their lives. In addition, they cannot see an end or escape from the beliefs that they can do nothing to change their circumstances. When the mind says, "I can't do this," the rest of the body obeys, whether it is true or not. Another issue is that there is poor judgment from TAs on when to step back and allowing deaf pupils to take a risk in challenging themselves further. In addition, when there is a lack of direction from the mainstream teacher in directing the TA, this can lead to a confusion and outcomes expected from the deaf pupil. The teacher of the deaf plays a critical role in relaying the expectation of the deaf pupils to the mainstream teachers. Now we will think about what is our role and responsibility as a teacher of the deaf. I will look at three areas. The first one is legislation, looking at the special educational needs and disability legislation. The second is guidance, so national guidance specific to deaf education. And the third is the teacher of the deaf mandatory qualification competencies. So thinking about what is the difference between legislation and guidance? Share your ideas with the person beside you. Legislation is legally binding, and where the term must is used, this refers to a statutory duty. Guidance is good advice and demonstrates good models to adhere to. Where the term should is used, this references for good practice guidance. We will now look at the SEND Code of Practice. These are some of the legislations that are applicable to the topic that I am presenting on. It clearly states that we, as teachers of the deaf, are ultimately responsible in ensuring that we do everything we can to push our deaf pupils to reach their full potential. The 6.44 section on SEN support in schools states that support should be in the form of a four-part cycle, which the next few slides will focus on. The SEND Code of Practice states that teachers are responsible and accountable for the progress of all pupils in their class. So as education providers, we need to plan to remove barriers that may disadvantage children who are deaf, as suggested by the Equality Act, through assessing and monitoring progress using the Assess, Plan, Do, Review cycle, supporting the pupil making good progress and securing good outcomes, as also suggested by the NATS. The first stage of the cycle is assessment. This requires us as teachers of the deaf to carry out observations on the deaf pupil, complete in-school screening assessments, and hold discussions with key staff, parents, carers to identify and analyze needs. In addition, any relevant assessments carried out by external agencies should also be taken into account, e.g. health, educational psychology, and social services. It is vital to also consider parental, pupil, and staff questionnaires for their views. Can you think of ways in which deafness can impact on successful learning? Discuss this with your partner and we will share your ideas we have in 30 seconds. These are some of the areas that I thought of alongside your ideas. The second stage of the cycle is the planning stage. Teachers of the deaf need to hold discussions and meet parents, staff, and any specialist services involved to plan for what needs to happen. We need to ensure that the plan is outcome focused, e.g. to improve, to develop, to achieve. We must remember the child and parents at the center of planning. The interventions must be outlined and the support required, hence drawing up a provision map. We must record expected impact on progress, development, behavior, and set a clear date for a review. The handout on page 1 reminds us of the challenges presented by a hearing loss and what the plan is likely to include. Please have a few minutes to discuss these challenges with the person beside you. The third stage is the do stage. The plan must be implemented as agreed by everyone involved. It is crucial that it shows the who, what, when, and how. We must continue to observe and record evidence of support and progress as teachers of the deaf. Teachers of the deaf must discuss with others, such as the SENCO, parents, colleagues, and the deaf pupil, about how effective the interventions have been and the impact on the pupil. We need to analyze and compare data, observations, and planned outcomes with others to form a wider picture. Carefully planning and thinking about the next steps with the parents, other specialists, and the deaf pupil. Please see the handout on page 2 about what aspects should be considered when reviewing. Where the pupil is not making expected amount of progress, all aspects of the plan must be considered in detail, especially the specialist assessments in language and communication. It is crucial to identify the source of difficulties and revise the plan and support strategies. A teacher of the deaf can again provide advice on this. This is now the beginning of the new Assess, Plan, Do, Review cycle. Now we will move on to looking at guidance. Let us remind ourselves what guidance is. Guidance is advice and demonstrates good models to adhere to. Page 3 of the handout demonstrates all the guidance we should follow relating to this topic. Take a few minutes to read through the guidance that we should adhere to as teachers of the deaf. Share your thoughts in relation to the topic of deaf pupils' over-reliance on TA support. We can clearly see from all the guidance that the teacher of the deaf is a core center in providing support to remove barriers to learning and putting in effective provision to enable good progress and securing good outcomes. As teachers of the deaf, we should be reflecting on our practice constantly and being critical to tailor the needs of individual deaf children. We should have an open mind to learn and evaluate constantly, enabling us to understand our deaf people's needs and abilities. As we are the experts in this field, we must share our knowledge and understanding of deaf pupils to our colleagues such as teaching assistants and mainstream class teachers, and make strong links with home and external agencies. We have to be quite flexible without compromising appropriate progression and quality of outcome to maximize access for our deaf pupils. It is crucial that we strive to ensure that staff, families, and other professionals work together effectively to achieve best practice and maximize achievement for deaf pupils. There is limited research on TA support with deaf pupils. The following research is based on mainstream children, and overall the evidence of the impact of TAs is limited. Firstly, I would like us to look at NASM's 2014 guidance on effective adult support. He states that TA support for teachers should enable pupils to engage and participate in lessons and more social aspects of school life, become more independent learners, and achieve and make progress. As teachers of the deaf, we should train our TAs to perform the above, as well as teaching them how to give effective feedback to our deaf pupils on their performance and teaching them strategies to motivate themselves and to plan and monitor their own learning, leading to self-regulation. The second is the Deployment and Impact Support Staff Project, which found that the more support pupils received from a TA, the less well they did. This team found that often teachers had little or no training in deploying and managing TAs, and that TAs were often underprepared for the lessons in which they supported. Teacher-TA meetings often depended on TA's goodwill, for example, coming in early or staying later. Reflecting on our practice as teachers of the deaf, we must ensure that we are dedicating a set time to enable professional dialogue and CPD for our TAs to deepen their knowledge about our deaf pupils. The aim of the Effective Deployment Teaching Assistance Project was to work with schools to develop and evaluate alternative ways of working in three fundamental areas relating to TAs: deployment, practice, and preparedness. We should reassess the TA role by considering these three areas. There has been some research into this field. The Salter et al. 2017 findings indicate that effective collaboration between mainstream teachers and teachers of the deaf is required to ensure there are appropriate expectations of deaf students to support improved outcomes. This study revealed there is frequently a lack of knowledge and understanding among mainstream teachers on the impact of deafness on learning. This in turn should make us reflect as practitioners on whether we are facilitating knowledge exchange and have effective working relationships with our TAs and mainstream class teachers. The relationships between the deaf pupil, the mainstream teacher, and the teacher of the deaf, as presented by the TAs, is illustrated in this diagram here. The deaf student's contact with the mainstream teacher and the teacher of the deaf to liaise regarding the deaf pupil is limited. Also, the TA's contact with the teacher of the deaf is limited, and the teacher of the deaf does not meet with the mainstream teacher frequently. The dominant relationship between the practitioners and the deaf pupil is, therefore, between the deaf pupil and the TA in the mainstream setting. Metacognition is about the ways learners monitor and purposefully direct their learning. Self-regulated learners are aware of their strengths and weaknesses and can motivate themselves to engage in and improve their learning. Developing deaf pupils' metacognitive knowledge of how they learn, their knowledge of themselves as a learner, of strategies, and of tasks is an effective way of improving pupil outcomes. To support deaf learners identify their strengths and weaknesses, we can ask them to use these four performance tag colors. They self-assess themselves by reflecting at the beginning and end of each task to express how they feel about their learning. The next strategy is to provide deaf pupils with repetition, clarification, visual prompt cards, as these would enable them to have access to the language they need. See page 5 of the handout for an example. These can be blue tacked on all tables so they have access to it at all times. Also, using a "Help, I'm stuck, what can I do?" visual prompt poster. See page 6 on the handout. This can support our deaf pupils to independently use strategies listed without over-relying on TA support to repeat these steps. Blank level questioning is a questioning framework developed by Mariam Blank, a renowned psychologist. There are 4 levels of questioning, which move from simple, concrete questions to more difficult, abstract questions. Blank's questions encourage development of general language and vocabulary, as well as skills in comprehension, reasoning, inferencing, predicting, and problem solving. See the handout given on page 7 for different examples of different questions for each level. Though a deaf student's complaint that a question is too hard might be more a matter of effort than ability, it is true that some questions are just harder than others. The difficulty of a question or assignment comes down to the level of critical thinking it requires. Bloom's taxonomy is a long-standing cognitive framework that categorizes critical reasoning in order to help educators set more well-defined learning goals. There are 6 levels in the taxonomy that each represent distinct levels of abstraction. The bottom level includes the most basic cognition, and the highest level includes the most intellectual and complicated thinking. So we must ensure TAs have an understanding of the level and pitch at where the deaf pupil stands in order to support them with the correct stage of questioning. Colorful semantics was developed as a speech and language therapy approach, focusing on the development of syntax via a semantic route. In the UK, colorful semantics has gained in popularity within clinical practice. However, its evidence-based research is currently limited, as found by Byron et al. And Law et al. Using the colorful semantic approach develops vocabulary and syntactic skills with the children experiencing language learning difficulties, as found by researchers Bennington, Morrissey, and Wade. The colorful semantics approach color codes words or parts of a sentence according to their thematic roles. Therefore, these color codes act as a visual prompt to indicate the structure of a sentence, helping to link the structure with its meaning, as found by Law et al. Classrooms are complex, dynamic environments that present many challenges to deaf learners. In order to understand how to improve outcomes, it is important to understand the nature of the events, interactions, and influences that occur and to consider why they have arisen. Collaborative working needs to work directly and for the interests of the deaf child, as suggested by the SEND Code of Practice and the NBCS Quality Standard 16. There has to be time allocated to improve working relationships in the classroom setting. The teacher of the deaf should book in meetings with the teaching assistant and the mainstream class teacher to discuss progress either on a weekly or fortnightly basis. This could be a quick 10-minute meeting during the teacher's lunchtime or at the end of the day. These meetings can cover the expectations and communication challenges as they arise. It is important that the mainstream teacher's expectations are based on a sound knowledge and understanding of the deaf pupil's abilities and needs, and the potential implications for the deaf pupil's learning. The presence of a TA also affects direct interaction between the deaf pupil and the mainstream teacher, limiting the opportunity for the mainstream class teacher to develop their understanding of the deaf pupil. So we must advise for TAs to take a step back and allow for more opportunities to be created for the mainstream class teacher to work with them. The teacher of the deaf should also provide insight regularly with any members of staff working with deaf pupils, as without a clear understanding on the impact of deafness on learning, it is unlikely that a teacher or TA would be able to accurately ascertain the ability of a deaf pupil. The teacher of the deaf must give mainstream class teachers access to the knowledge they need to shape their practices. A crucial component of multi-agency working is effective collaboration, as suggested by Dalzell. As the NBCS Quality Standard 16 states, all the different agencies should collaboratively work together to ensure positive child-centered outcomes that in turn assist better educational outcomes. There is frequently a lack of knowledge and understanding among mainstream teachers and TAs on the impact of deafness on learning. This is, in turn, a consequence of current working practices that do not facilitate effective knowledge exchange between mainstream and specialist staff. It is likely this lack of understanding contributes to inaccurate expectations of deaf learners and to the engagement of pedagogical practices that create additional challenges for them. It seems essential, therefore, to develop and evaluate new models of engagement for teachers of the deaf, teaching assistants, and mainstream teachers, which will facilitate more efficacious and informed collaborative working practices to inform outcomes for deaf pupils. This in turn will support a reduction of over-reliance on TA support. I hope this presentation has given you many ideas on how to support the reduction of over-reliance on TAs. Please share any questions you may have. Thank you for your time.